Blood spatters across frosted leaves as another body falls. Amerikaner Schwein! The taunts pierce the Normandy fog like knives. German snipers rule these hedgerows, their mockery more devastating than their bullets. Death arrives with mathematical precision, leaving broken men clutching dog tags and pictures of sweethearts. But in their arrogance, they never saw it coming. The M1 Garand's distinctive ping becoming their death knell. Subscribe to witness how American ingenuity transformed humiliation into a symphony of calculated retribution, as the mockers learn what it means to become the hunted. The hedgerows of Normandy stood like ancient walls, 12 feet high and rooted in centuries of French soil, creating a maze that trapped men like cattle in a slaughterhouse. Private James Harrell pressed his back against the earthen barrier, the June sun beating down on his helmet while sweat traced cold rivulets down his spine despite the summer heat. He wasn't sweating from exertion or even the woolen uniform that clung to his skin. It was the fear, raw and primal, that had settled into his bones after watching 3 men from his squad crumple to the ground in less than 10 minutes, each taken by a single, precisely placed shot that seemed to materialize from the very air around them. The worst part wasn't the dying, it was what came between the shots. German voices, distant yet clear enough to carry across the killing fields, called out in broken English after each thunderous crack of their Mauser rifles. Another American pig for the slaughter, followed by laughter that rippled through the hedgerows like a poisonous gas. Sometimes they would call out names they'd gathered from dog tags, or describe the contents of letters they'd stripped from the bodies of the fallen, intimate details weaponized to demoralize those still breathing, still cowering, still waiting for their turn to die. Captain Miller slid down beside him, his face streaked with dirt and something darker that Harold pretended not to notice. "They're playing with us," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the distant rumble of artillery that never seemed to silence the snipers that haunted them. "1 shot, 1 kill, that's their game. Our boys are out there with their Thompsons, spraying lead like they're watering a garden, and these kraut bastards are picking us off like it's target practice at a county fair." The captain's hands trembled slightly as he reloaded his sidearm, a gesture that frightened Harold more than the sniper's bullets. When officers showed fear, it crystallized into something tangible that could spread through a unit faster than dysentery. The German sniper positions remained invisible, their Mauser K-98s leaving no muzzle flash, their shooters wrapped in camouflage that blended with the ancient Norman landscape as if they'd grown from it like the hedgerows themselves. Intelligence reported they were mostly Wehrmacht marksmen, but rumors spread of SS sharpshooters among them, men who collected American dog tags like trophies and who had developed a psychological warfare as effective as their marksmanship. They would call out details about the Americans' hometowns, snippets from intercepted mail, or simply mock the panicked radio chatter they monitored, creating an omnipresent sense that death wasn't just coming, it was watching, waiting, and enjoying the anticipation. Across the field lay the bodies of those who had tried to advance, their blood soaking into soil already saturated with centuries of warfare. Harold could make out the form of Private Dennings, the Brooklyn kid who talked endlessly about his mother's apple pie, now face down in mud with his Thompson submachine gun still clutched in his lifeless hands. The weapon represented everything wrong with their current predicament. American industrial might, producing firepower that couldn't hit what it couldn't see, bullets sprayed in desperate arcs that left their shooters exposed to the patient, precise response of German marksmanship. As twilight descended over the hedgerow hell, the shooting temporarily subsided, but the psychological torment continued. German voices carried through the gathering darkness, reciting names of the dead, describing the fear they could smell on the Americans, promising more of the same tomorrow. Harold closed his eyes, the weight of his standard-issue M1 Springfield bolt-action rifle suddenly feeling inadequate against the invisible death that awaited them with the dawn. He didn't know then that salvation would come not from the heavens or high command, but from the innovative spirit of American engineering. A semi-automatic answer to the mockery that would soon silence the laughter, one precise shot at a time. The supply trucks arrived under cover of darkness, their headlights dimmed to narrow slits that carved minimal paths through the Normandy night. Private Harold watched from his foxhole as crates were unloaded with unusual urgency, officers hovering around the shipment with an excitement that seemed out of place in the grim theatre of hedgerow combat. Word spread through whispers passed from foxhole to foxhole. New rifles were being distributed, not to replace lost or damaged weapons, but as a deliberate tactical shift ordered directly from division headquarters after the mounting sniper casualties had been deemed unacceptable. Dawn revealed the M1 Garand in Harold's hands, its weight both familiar and strange compared to the Springfield he'd trained with and carried since basic. Sergeant Walsh moved among the men, demonstrating the loading of the distinctive 8-round en-bloc clip, the proper stance to manage the semi-automatic recoil, and most importantly, the rate of fire that distinguished this weapon from anything they'd carried before. "This isn't just a new rifle, boys," Walsh explained, his voice low but vibrating with intensity that commanded attention, even as they all remained pressed to the earth to avoid sniper detection. "This is a whole new language of war, one that Jerry doesn't speak yet, but he's about to get a crash course in American conversation." Udun, the Garand's wooden stock, felt smooth against Harold's cheek as he practiced dry firing at imaginary targets, learning the trigger pull that was lighter than his old Springfield, understanding the mechanism that would automatically eject the spent cartridge and chamber a new round without requiring him to work a bolt and lose his sight picture. Most men in the company had only fired bolt-action rifles before. One shot, work the bolt, aim again, fire, a rhythm that matched the methodical German snipers shot for shot, but could never surpass them in volume or sustained accuracy. The Garand changed that equation fundamentally. A skilled shooter could fire all 8 rounds in rapid succession, maintaining target acquisition throughout, creating a sustained pressure that bolt-action rifles simply couldn't match. Across the hedgerow field, where so many had died the previous days, the German snipers resumed their grim work with the rising sun, apparently unaware of the transformation occurring in the American lines. The first shot rang out, followed by the familiar mocking call, "Americana, we have all day while you die minute by minute," followed by laughter that no longer seemed like psychological warfare, but instead revealed itself as the hubris it had always been. Captain Miller gathered the men with newly issued Garands, 26 in all, and laid out a plan that had been developed overnight by officers who recognized the weapon's potential to change the fundamental dynamic of their standoff. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity, born from desperation, but refined into something approaching art. Instead of advancing across the open field, where the snipers held every advantage, 5 teams of Garand riflemen would spread along their own hedgerow, each team responsible for a 60-degree sector of fire. When a German sniper revealed his position by firing, the nearest team would respond not with a single retaliatory shot, but with a coordinated volley of semi-automatic fire that would saturate the sniper's position with up to 40 rounds in less than 30 seconds. A volume of precisely aimed fire that would make concealment irrelevant through sheer ballistic probability. As the morning progressed, the Germans continued their methodical killing, unaware that each shot now served not to demoralize, but to pinpoint their positions for the waiting Garand teams. Harold found himself assigned to the central team, covering the area where the most casualties had occurred the previous day. The waiting was excruciating, every moment stretched by anticipation until a shot rang out from a copse of trees 300 yards distant, followed by a scream from the American lines. Captain Miller's voice cut through the moment. "Team 3, target identified. Fire for effect." The command unleashed something new onto the battlefield. Not the desperate spray of submachine guns, but the disciplined, rapid precision of American semi-automatic fire finding its voice for the first time in the Hedgerow War. The first coordinated Garand volley struck the German sniper position like a horizontal hailstorm, 40 rounds converging on a space no larger than a kitchen table in less than half a minute. Through his rifle sights, Harold witnessed the unprecedented effect. Branches sheared from concealing trees, chunks of earth erupting from the sniper's berm, and most significantly, the panicked movement of a human figure suddenly caught in a type of fire they had never experienced. Unlike the wild inaccuracy of submachine guns or the singular threat of bolt-action rifles, the Garand teams delivered something entirely new to the battlefield equation: sustained precision at volume. The distinctive sound that would soon become infamous among German snipers punctuated the American volleys, a sharp, metallic ping that rang out when a Garand's 8-round en-bloc clip was exhausted and automatically ejected from the rifle. In those early engagements, some Germans mistakenly interpreted this sound as a moment of vulnerability, believing it signaled an American rifleman with an empty weapon. Several German snipers, hearing the ping and thinking they faced a single shooter who now needed to reload, briefly exposed themselves to take advantage of this perceived opportunity, only to discover they had revealed their position to 4 other Garand riflemen whose clips were still loaded and whose sights now converged on the newly visible target. By mid-morning, 7 German sniper positions had been neutralized, and a palpable shift in battlefield psychology had occurred. American GIs, who had cowered in terror, now moved with growing confidence behind the protective curtain of Garand fire. The mocking calls from the German lines diminished, replaced by urgent commands in German that, while unintelligible to most Americans, clearly conveyed confusion and alarm. Radio operators reported intercepting German communications, requesting urgent reinforcement of sniper teams, and expressing confusion over the Americans' new capability to deliver machine gun accuracy without machine guns. A testament to how completely the Garand had disrupted the tactical assumptions of the battlefield. Captain Miller called the Garand team leaders together during a lull in the fighting, his face showing the first genuine smile Harold had seen since landing in Normandy. "They're pulling back their forward sniper positions," he explained, unfolding a map marked with intelligence updates. "They're retreating to the secondary hedgerow line, which means we've just reclaimed almost 400 yards of territory without a single man having to advance across open ground." The accomplishment was significant, not just in territorial terms, but in what it represented. American forces had seized the psychological initiative, transforming themselves from hunted to hunters through the application of superior technology aligned with tactical adaptation. The afternoon brought a change in German tactics, revealing how profoundly the battlefield dynamic had shifted. Rather than firing from fixed positions, their snipers began using shoot-and-move techniques, firing a single shot before immediately relocating to avoid the devastating Garand response. This adaptation came too late for many of their best marksmen, already eliminated during the morning's engagement, and it surrendered the psychological advantage they had previously held. No longer could they fire with impunity and mock the Americans between shots. Now, each German sniper lived with the knowledge that his shot signature would trigger a hailstorm of semi-automatic fire that could find him through concealment by sheer volume and precision. As dusk approached and the fighting died down, a different sound carried across the battlefield. American voices, raised not in pain or fear, but in something approaching celebration. Soldiers who had spent days pinned down were now moving freely behind their hedgerow, improving positions, evacuating the wounded who had been stranded in no man's land, and most tellingly, calling out to the German lines with the distinctive ping of an ejected Garand clip, followed by phrases like, "7 more where that came from, Fritz." The psychological warfare had been reversed, the hunters now contemplating what it meant to be hunted. And all because of a mechanical innovation that had transformed each American rifleman from an isolated target into a node in a network of overwhelming firepower. The German sniper adjustments came swiftly as news of the American weapons' capabilities spread through their ranks. Oberfeldwebel Heinrich Keller, a decorated marksman with over 100 confirmed kills on the Eastern Front, arrived to reorganize the shattered sniper sections, bringing with him new tactics developed specifically to counter the American M1 Garand. Under his direction, German snipers now operated in teams of 3, one shooter, one spotter, and one security element whose sole responsibility was to watch for the American counterfire and signal when to withdraw. Their firing positions became increasingly sophisticated, incorporating multiple escape routes and false positions designed to draw Garand fire away from the actual sniper's location. Private Harrell, now designated as his Garand team's lead shooter due to his growing proficiency with the weapon, found himself in an evolving chess match with an unseen opponent whose moves betrayed increasing respect for American capabilities. The German mockery had ceased entirely, replaced by a tense professional silence broken only by the periodic crack of a Mauser, now fired from ever greater distances as the German snipers sought to operate beyond the effective range of the Garand teams. The psychological dynamic had transformed completely. Where once the Americans had felt naked and exposed, now it was the German marksman who operated with the constant awareness that a single shot would bring a storm of semi-automatic fire upon their position. Captain Miller expanded the Garand strategy as more rifles reached the front lines, creating dedicated counter-sniper platoons that operated independently of the line companies, free to move laterally behind the American hedgerow positions to respond wherever German sniper activity was detected. These units developed an aggressive doctrine that abandoned the purely reactive approach of the early days. They began to predict likely German sniper positions based on terrain analysis and deliberately drew fire using helmet-on-stick decoys, transforming the Garand from a defensive equalizer into an offensive weapon in the sniper duel. The distinctive ping of empty clips became so common across the front that German intelligence reports began referring to it as the bell that tolls for our marksmen. The hedgerow country, initially a perfect environment for the German sniper's patient, deliberate style of warfare, gradually revealed itself to favor the Garand teams as they mastered their weapons capabilities. Where a German sniper with a Mauser needed absolute stillness and concentration to make his one shot count, a Garand rifleman could fire from less optimal positions, knowing that his follow-up shots could correct for initial inaccuracy. This fundamental difference allowed Americans to utilize firing positions that Germans couldn't risk, shooting through smaller gaps in vegetation, firing from more exposed angles, and maintaining pressure even when visibility was compromised by smoke, dust, or fading light. The psychological burden shifted. Precision became the domain of the many rather than the few, and the German sniper's previously decisive advantage of patience was neutralized by the Americans' newfound ability to saturate a target area with accurate fire. By the campaign's third week, intelligence officers documented a significant decline in German sniper effectiveness across the entire Normandy front, with casualty rates from precision fire dropping by over 60%. More telling were the captured German documents that revealed a fundamental shift in their infantry doctrine. Snipers were now instructed to focus primarily on officer identification and counter-sniper operations, rather than general harassment of American lines. The operational guidance specifically referenced the M1 Garand as the priority target, instructing German marksmen to eliminate the American semi-automatic riflemen first, as they represent the greatest threat to our forward positions and security elements. As July heat baked the Norman countryside, transforming the once muddy lanes between hedgerows into dusty tracks that revealed every footprint and movement, the sniper war entered its final phase. German losses had depleted their ranks of experienced marksmen, forcing them to deploy less qualified shooters who lacked the patience and fieldcraft of their predecessors. These replacements made mistakes, firing too quickly, choosing obvious positions, failing to properly conceal their firing signatures, and the Garand teams exploited each error with the practiced efficiency of predators who had learned to read the subtle signs of vulnerable prey. The weapon that had arrived as a defensive salvation had evolved into an offensive system that methodically dismantled the German advantage sniper by sniper, position by position, hedgerow by hedgerow. The final German sniper nest overlooking the strategic crossroads at St. Lo had been identified after 3 days of patient observation by Harol's Garand team, now expanded to include a dedicated spotter equipped with captured German optics. Unlike the earlier, more exposed positions, this one had been constructed with a craftsman's attention to detail, a reinforced hole beneath the roots of an ancient oak tree, its firing aperture disguised by natural foliage and offering fields of fire across 600 yards of open ground that American forces would need to cross to continue their advance. The German occupants had shown exceptional discipline, firing only when guaranteed a kill, changing their shooting schedule to avoid establishing patterns, and never taking consecutive shots from the same firing port. Captain Miller, recently promoted to major for his development of counter-sniper tactics, gathered Harol and the other team leaders in a bombed-out farmhouse, a safe distance from the German position. "This is the last significant sniper threat before St. Lo," he explained, unfolding detailed sketches of the position based on observation reports. "Intelligence believes it's manned by at least 3 snipers from their 12th SS Panzer Division. These aren't conscripts or Wehrmacht marksmen, they're fanatical Hitler youth, trained from childhood with a rifle." The gravity of his assessment hung in the air, acknowledgement that despite their successes, they now faced the most dangerous opponents yet. Young men whose entire lives had been preparation for this deadly game of patience and precision. The elimination operation would require a departure from their established tactics, which the SS snipers had clearly studied and adapted to. Rather than responding to German fire with concentrated volleys, 3 separate Garand teams would establish overlapping fields of fire during the pre-dawn hours, remaining completely silent and inactive, regardless of German provocations, until precise coordinates for the sniper nest were confirmed by artillery observers who would be watching for muzzle flash or movement. Once location was verified, the teams would fire not directly at the position, but at carefully selected points surrounding it, the base of the oak tree, the ground before the aperture, and the likely escape route, to trigger the deadliest weapon in their arsenal. In the grey half-light of Normandy dawn, the trap was set. Harol lay motionless behind a fallen section of hedgerow, his Garand loaded but untouched, as he observed the sniper position through a carefully concealed periscope. 200 yards to his left and right, the other teams maintained similar silent vigilance, creating an invisible net around their target. The German position remained dormant until 07:23 hours, when a single shot rang out, followed by a cry from the American lines, where a reconnaissance patrol had been dispatched as bait. Not expendable men, but volunteers who understood the stakes and moved in patterns specifically designed to draw fire while minimizing their actual vulnerability. The radio hissed softly at Harol's side. "Position confirmed. Grid coordinates transmitted to battery. Fire mission incoming in 90 seconds. This was the evolution of their strategy. No longer would they respond with rifle fire alone, however accurate and sustained it might be. The Garand teams had become forward observers for artillery, using their ability to fix sniper positions precisely enough to call down high explosive justice from the heavens. The distant thump of 105mm howitzers firing was followed seconds later by the whistle of shells passing overhead, a sound that had once terrified Harold, but now carried the promise of deliverance. The first artillery barrage deliberately avoided a direct hit on the sniper nest, instead walking high-explosive shells in a tightening circle around the position, shattering the ancient oak's upper branches, cratering the ground nearby, and most importantly, driving the snipers exactly where Harold's team expected them to go. As predicted, the rear escape tunnel of the sniper nest disgorged 3 camouflaged figures in Wehrmacht Feldgrau, moving with the practiced urgency of men who had rehearsed this withdrawal countless times. What they couldn't have rehearsed was emerging directly into the pre-sighted killing zone of 24 Garand rifles positioned specifically for this moment. The distinctive crack of American semi-automatic fire erupted from 3 directions simultaneously, catching the German snipers in overlapping fields of precision that offered neither concealment nor escape. Unlike the indiscriminate spray of submachine guns or the overwhelming but inaccurate curtain of machine gun fire, this was a targeted storm of individually aimed shots, each one finding its mark with deliberate intent. The first German fell immediately, struck by multiple rounds, before his foot cleared the tunnel entrance. The second managed 3 running steps before the combined fire from Harold's section scythed through his lower body. The third and final sniper, displaying the exceptional situational awareness that had likely kept him alive until this moment, dropped flat at the first sound of gunfire and crawled toward a shallow depression that might have offered temporary cover. Harold tracked this last survivor through his sights, leading him slightly as the German crawled with desperate speed toward potential safety. The pressure of his finger on the Garand's trigger was not the panicked squeeze of earlier battles, but the controlled, deliberate pressure of a marksman who had transcended his former self. 7 rounds remained in his clip, and he would need only 1. As the German sniper reached the edge of the depression, Harold exhaled slowly and completed his trigger pull. The Garand bucked against his shoulder. The .30-06 round crossed the intervening space in an instant, and the crawling figure suddenly went limp, his outstretched hand just inches from the depression that had promised sanctuary. As the echo of the last shots faded across the Norman countryside, an unfamiliar sound replaced it, silence, pure and complete, unmarred by the crack of sniper fire or the mocking calls that had once tormented American lines. Major Miller moved among the Garand teams as they secured the area, his face showing not triumph but the solemn recognition of a necessary task completed. 8 weeks ago we were the hunted, he said quietly, looking out over the battlefield now clear of the threat that had once seemed omnipresent and invincible. They mocked us because they could, because we had no answer to their patience and precision. Today, that chapter closes. He picked up a discarded German Mauser K98, examining its precision craftsmanship before setting it aside with something approaching respect for the engineering, if not the purpose. The distinctive ping of a Garand ejecting its empty clip echoed across the field one final time as Harold cleared his weapon. The sound no longer a liability, but a proclamation. Technology and tactics had converged to silence the mockery that had once seemed as inevitable as the Norman rain. The German snipers, who had once ruled these hedgerows through fear and precision, now lay still in the summer soil, their weapons silent, their arrogance answered not with hatred, but with the dispassionate efficiency of American innovation. As the troops prepared to advance towards Saint-Lô, the M1 Garand had transformed from a mere rifle into something more profound, the mechanical embodiment of a national character that could adapt, innovate, and overcome even the most entrenched advantages through the practical application of industrial might and frontline ingenuity.